The wind swept over the dry plains of Arizona, carrying with it the whispers of the Apache lands and the creaking sounds of a lonely wooden windmill. Jonathan Blake, a quiet, soft-spoken farmer, spent most of his life tilling the stubborn soil of his late father's ranch. He wasn't much for words, and most people in the nearby town of Silver Creek called him Silent John. He had never known love, never tasted adventure. His life was the rhythm of sunrises, harvests, and the same soft prayers whispered to the heavens every dusk. But on one scorching afternoon, fate rode toward him in the form of a woman who would change everything. Her name was Nayeli, a proud, striking Apache woman, with eyes darker than the shadow of dusk, and a presence that made the wind stop for a heartbeat. Jonathan found her standing by the edge of his field, her horse grazing quietly. She didn't speak right away, and when she finally did, her words were not what any man expected to hear. "I want a child from you," she said, her voice steady but trembling somewhere deep beneath the calm. Jonathan nearly dropped the bucket of water he was carrying. His throat tightened. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake," he stammered, taking off his hat as if politeness could make sense of madness. But Nayeli didn't flinch. She explained her tribe's suffering, years of being hunted, their numbers dwindling, their bloodlines fading. The elders had told her to seek a man of strong heart and honest soul, someone who would protect, not possess. She had watched Jonathan from afar for months, learning his ways, the gentleness with which he spoke to his animals, the quiet mercy in his eyes when he buried a wounded bird instead of turning away. She believed he was the one. Jonathan was torn, every moral thread in his body twisted with confusion. He was a man of faith, and yet this request, so wild and raw, pulled at something deeper than faith, something primal, something human. He offered her shelter in the barn that night, mostly because he couldn't leave her to the coyotes and cold desert air. She accepted with a nod, and when the stars fell across the sky, he sat on the porch staring at the barn's faint light, wondering who she really was. Morning came with golden light and the smell of rain. Nayeli emerged, wrapped in a blanket, her hair loose and damp from washing in the creek. She began helping him without asking, feeding the chickens, mending a fence, grinding corn. Jonathan watched her move with quiet strength, like the earth itself had shaped her hands. Over the next few days, she worked beside him as if she belonged there, never repeating her request, but her eyes always holding that same silent fire. Jonathan tried to ignore the pull he felt, but each time their hands brushed or her laughter echoed against the barn walls, something within him began to change. One evening, as the sky burned red with sunset, she told him her full story. Her tribe had been forced into the mountains hiding from bounty hunters who killed for Apache scalps. Her brother had been taken, and she'd made a vow to ensure their lineage did not vanish. "We have lived through hate," she whispered. "I want to give life now." Jonathan felt her pain, her courage, and perhaps for the first time, he understood what love could mean beyond his quiet routines. Yet he couldn't answer her then. His heart was full, but his words were trapped. That night the rain began to fall hard, and as thunder rolled across the valley, the shy farmer and the Apache woman found themselves seeking warmth beside a flickering lantern, too lonely, souls caught between worlds, with destiny closing in like the storm. When Jonathan woke at dawn, the rain had stopped, but everything had changed. The storm had washed the valley clean, yet it left behind a silence that carried weight. Nayeli was outside, her hair dripping, her hands clasped around something, a small pouch made of deerskin. She handed it to him. Inside was a turquoise stone carved with Apache symbols. "It means life," she said. "Last night I asked the spirits if I was wrong to come here. They sent me a dream of your hands planting seeds. The earth listened to you, Jonathan. It will listen again." Her words struck something deep inside him. He looked at her, really looked, and realized that she wasn't asking for desire. She was asking for legacy, for hope, for survival. The world had taken everything from her people, and yet she stood there unbroken. "Nayeli," he said softly, "if I help you, it won't be because your elders told you to. It'll be because I choose to." Her eyes softened, and in that instant, the shy farmer became something greater than he'd ever imagined. Days passed, and their bond deepened, not through passion first, but through shared labor and quiet understanding. She taught him to track animals. He showed her how to tend crops. They laughed at each other's mistakes, and slowly, the walls of loneliness that had caged them both began to fall. But peace in the Wild West never lasted long. One evening, a group of bounty hunters rode up to the ranch, their leader shouting that an Apache woman was seen nearby. Jonathan's heart pounded. He hid Nayeli in the cellar and stepped outside, his hands trembling but his eyes steady. "Ain't no Apache here," he said firmly. But the men pushed past him, tearing through the barn, overturning barrels, shouting threats. When one of them raised his gun toward the cellar door, Jonathan grabbed a shovel and swung. Chaos erupted. Gunfire, shouting, the smell of smoke. By the time the dust settled, Jonathan was bleeding from his arm, and the bounty hunters had fled into the distance. Nayeli ran to him, tears streaming down her face. She tore part of her dress to bandage his wound, whispering prayers in her language. That night, under the wounded sky, she finally said the words again. "I want a child from you." But this time, her voice broke. "Not just for my people. For us." Jonathan took her hands. "Then we give life," he whispered. "Not just a child, Nayeli, but a future." Months later, the land bloomed again. The ranch that once echoed with silence now carried laughter and the soft songs of an Apache woman. The shy farmer, once too afraid to speak, found his voice in every sunrise beside her. Their love defied borders, tribes, and the hate of men who could not understand it. And when their child was born, half Apache, half settler, Jonathan held him up to the morning light and whispered, "You are the bridge between worlds." In that moment, the spirits of the valley seemed to breathe again. The farm was no longer lonely. The land no longer cursed. It was reborn, just as they were.